Thinking back on the other people that you've interacted from the Antelope Valley from that time period, from the Greatest Generation, the one person that really moved you as far as their story, their personal story. I know there's so many, and each one has their own unique aspect, but a lot of them that I would travel with would bring me to tears more times than I care to speak of. But Charlie, who lost his brother,
yes,
when he would speak to classrooms of young people, and it was always hard to fight.
Tell me your most moving story, Bob.
Oh, my most moving story. Oh boy. Carl Barnes, the guys that were just, they weren't pillars of the community, but they were pillar Americans. Okay, that when you saw their lives and how they lived their lives,
yes,
were not, when they came back from the war, they weren't parading around, look at me, look at me,
yes,
look at me. It was to go over and do something overseas and come back and deal with such horrific conditions. We think of our Pearl Harbor survivors, and the majority of those guys
yes,
that we interviewed and stuff, were for the duration of the war.
Yes.
They were at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and they ended up in Tokyo Bay.
Ken Crease he was on the USS Detroit, which was a four-stacker World War I cruiser.
Correct.
A World War I vintage cruiser. And it was in the Aleutian Islands, which was the only place where the Japanese landed on American territory.
Right.
There was a battle there that was tough. And he had 4 years, no shore leave, from baby sailor at 16 to his 21st birthday. And then he went on to, as you say, this American pillar life. He, like so many of those guys, became nuts and bolts of the Antelope Valley's aerospace military aviation
yes,
community.
Yeah.
Some of those guys built the U-2, and it's not understood well now that the U-2 saved the world a couple of times. And when I say save the world, thermonuclear warfare was the sword of Damocles that hung over from a period of about 1949 until 1991. And this dragon is reappearing.
Yes, it is.
Okay? That U-2 provided the intelligence that provided the information so that Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy could make quality decisions that brought us back from the brink of human annihilation. But that plane was bolted together in Burbank and in Palmdale and out there at the area in Nevada.
Right.
The tests were flown there. The men and the women who were responsible for that program, none of them getting credit within the company, some historical recognition.
Right.
But we have done extraordinary things out here.
Yeah, we have, and we're very blessed to, have the aerospace community out here to where, once again, the Pearl Harbor survivors just working side by side with guys pounding rivets.
Yep.
And the SR-71, we think of the great strides. I think of Carl Barnes, who ended up on the X-15 program.
Oh my.
And from the flight engineer in a B-17, growing up, barefoot in Bakersfield, to where he's out on the dry lake bed, supporting the X-15 program.
Yes.
And then going on to...
so Pete Knight was out there somewhere. Carl Barnes
absolutely.
was out there somewhere. And
absolutely. And
there's a lot of connection.
When the time came for Carl to retire, and a lot of stuff that he couldn't talk about because some of his inventions were made. Matter of fact, he gave me a lot of the stuff that the reason the F-18 flies so well today is because of his invention that he managed to come up with. That helped alleviate a structural problem with the tail fins with turbulence going over across them. I go, my God, Carl, how did you basically come up with that? And he goes, it was on the test bench. I didn't have to go up to Mahogany Row. and stuff. They brought it down to us guys down here in the shop and said, we got a problem. How do we fix this? And we had the mindset and the ability to say, like, the engineers would listen to what we had to say.
My war stories about Carl, and I got to hear them because you found them for me. Thank you. Carl Barnes, of course, we got the haystack with the Nazis escaping and evading, but the Chosin Reservoir is one of those key events in American military history where our Army soldiers and our Marines were surrounded. Fortunately, Chesty Puller said, we'll just advance in another direction, and they fought their way back to the coast. But Carl Barnes was flying resupply on that, and something about taking off and dropping hand grenades out of the cockpit of a C-47 is just it's not too good to be true. It's just extraordinary.
It is, and that was the grit of those individuals, I guess. So we're going to go to a break right here and stuff, and we'll continue up, and we'll get off into another little area here and stuff. Okay.